Now, when we talk about presenting data in a PowerPoint presentation, this is a classic view that is very worth your time to kind of absorb and get very comfortable with. A lot of consultants use this, same thing for business analysis. The structure of this page is very classic, so there's not much that you need to do to spice things up. And if you kind of follow this template, chances are when you're presenting data, this is going to do the trick for you. So this template that I'm talking about is basically the left-hand side, right-hand side structure. And what we typically tend to do is we have data on the left-hand side of the page. It could take up half of the page, could take up 2/3. The ratio is up to you and how much you want to present in terms of information density. But that's on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is where you have your key takeaways. So these are your insights, the key points that you think are important for the audience to understand and appreciate why it's so interesting to have this data here. And then at the bottom, you always want to have footnotes. So it's not enough to just put some data on the page and kind of not explain where it came from or how you arrived at these numbers, especially if you're doing some sort of complex analysis and you need to build credibility with your audience. It's always important to have footnotes to say, number one, where the data is coming from, sources, and number two, any methodology notes, so assumptions that you made or some sort of calculations that you did in order to arrive at these numbers. And having these, you don't even have to talk through it. Having these gives you the credibility to then talk about what you actually want to talk about, which is the numbers and the insights. So again, the structure of a very classic data-rich sort of presentation style. Left-hand side is the chart, right-hand side is the takeaways, and then at the bottom is your footnotes, which include sources and methodology. And of course, we can make variations of the template that we just saw. So instead of just having a simple chart on the left, oftentimes, as we go deeper and deeper into a project or deeper and deeper into some analysis, we need more cuts of the data, right? Or more ways of looking at it through different segmentation lenses, some different filters, etc. So as you build it, as you build those views and analyses up, just think about how it fits within the left-hand side of the chart. And the principles are the same. You still show the chart on the left-hand side, but how much detail you then expose up can vary depending on how deep your analysis goes. So in this case, it's still relatively simple, but you've seen how the bar chart basically gets sort of like stripped out into different segments. And those segments then have their own characteristics, such as your annual growth rate, which is your compounded annual growth rate or CAGR, the bubbles that you see towards the right of the chart. So these are details that you can always add in. Sometimes we even add like tables next to the chart. So potentially like segment size for each segment that you see here, followed by some characteristics or some growth. So as much detail as you need in order for the interesting insights to start emerging. But remember, at the end of the day, the structure stays the same. So left-hand side, right-hand side, and then footnotes. Now you can always choose to mix up the visuals a little bit in order to get the type of formatting that you personally like. So we can make adjustments to the main setup. But notice that the key elements are always going to be the same. So that's left-hand side having the chart and the data, right-hand side having the insights, and footnotes at the bottom. So the only things that we've changed is literally whether we're underlining the words at the top for the chart titles, how we're doing the transition from left-hand side to right-hand side. Here we've put an arrow. So just have a look at this and see what works best for you. I will say that this style is a little bit more specific to what we like to do at BCG. The previous page that you saw is much more typical of McKinsey, but at the end of the day, it's not so important how you present it as long as it's consistent within the page and across the pages. So what we don't want to see is, like one page we do it the McKinsey style and then the next page we do it the BCG style. There's no reason to be switching around. So pick one that you like and stick with it within one deck. It should be consistent. I'm going to show you another example of a data-rich slide, but this time It's a little bit different in the sense that we have a mix of quantitative data, which you see on the column charts on the left, and qualitative data, which you see on the quotes in the middle of the page. So again, there's not too much variation, right? You can see left-hand side is the data, qualitative and quantitative and qualitative, and right-hand side is the takeaways, footnotes at the bottom. So yeah, key takeaway from this is no matter what sort of analysis you're doing, quantitative or qualitative, as long as the analysis involves some sort of data and then some sort of key takeaways from that data, then this main setup that you have is a very reliable type of template that you can always use. And as long as you're consistent with it, as long as visually it's clear what constitutes the data and what constitutes the takeaways, then you're pretty safe to basically follow this framework of saying, hey, here's the data and here's what I think is interesting about it. So let's discuss the key takeaways. And that's where you come in with your narrative. So again, not too much variation here, just showing you how different slides can be structured following the same underlying principles.